Good morning everybody, and it's always a treat when I get to introduce two brand new mocks to the channel, especially real life ones like this. And today we are going to be taking a look at both Mineru and the Seas construct as part of my ongoing efforts to bring LEGO Zelda sets into real life. This is one of 3 IRL model sets that I've done for the second half of 2025, and this one's super special because these guys, Seas Construct Knockout, the custom set, is one of my top 15 models that I've designed for the Legend of Zelda series. So it's a real treat to get it here because it doesn't often happen that of those 15, not many of them have made it into real life yet, although obviously we're working on that as we speak. Obviously, these guys have also undergone some serious changing from their digital versions, mostly due, of course, to the custom part that we were using. And I'm also going to talk to you about all the decals, as well as, of course, showing you the features. And then this is still their draft version, although I'm 95% happy. There are some stability issues we're going to talk about, as well as upgrades I'm going to make, because ideally I want these two to sort of sit on a base together, probably on these plates on turntables, so that I can turn them to fight and put a fence behind them. But then again, we'll talk about that and maybe do it in a YouTube short. We're going to start with Seas Construct because he in particular is, of course, one of the bosses from the game, and we're getting very close to having all the bosses. I'm looking at Queen Gibdo right across my table, so that is a video that we will see before too long. And honestly, because I think out of the two, Seas might indeed be my favourite. And you're going to have to forgive me for leaving them on their stands today. They do have full leg articulation, but just obviously given the nature of them and their tiny legs, they work much better when they're fixed in this position. So let's take a look at what Seized has to offer. Now, the thing with all my constructs and what we're going to take a look at later on when we talk about the development history of this guy is this technique down here on the arms, and it's what allows us to create that energy going through rings effect, and that is the minifigure superhero poser piece with the hollow 1x1 round studs. This was a technique first seen on the Daily Bugle set with Dr. Octopus and hasn't really been seen since, at least in any capacity. You can see that it allows for this sort of greater degree of rotation almost at every individual point, making these guys super posable. And then as we continue down into sort of the bigger segments, the same principle is used, however it just becomes a little bit more rigid and stiff. So for example, we have got rotation around that joint there. There's this bar which can allow spinning. Of course, there's this one here at the upper arm, and then right at the back there is a ball joint, but you're going to watch as soon as I try and do this. It's unfortunate that my ball joints in particular, this piece here, is known to be quite stiff. So I'm going to be looking for a looser joint potentially for these guys. Maybe we'll go to sort of clip and socket instead, just because it always breaks at the wrong place. Another point of a sort of breakage that you're probably going to see throughout today's video is the hips here. This, I actually have parts on the way to fix. Of course, I'm going to add sort of like a Technic pin and just get a sort of a bar stuck in there so that there can be a little bit more strength for these guys as well. Although, now that I'm thinking about it, that's not really going to help actually, because it will just reinforce what's already a pretty strong connection underneath the sort of dish into the base there. However, it will run all the way through, which will still be an upgrade, and maybe we'll add just a little bit more resistance to sort of breakages and so on. Of course, everywhere that you're seeing sort of the sand green and the dark bluish grey 3x3 dishes, and you'll see this on Mineru as well, that was the part that was changed out from the custom mold, and again we'll talk about that later. But we do actually have leg articulation. You can see the sort of ball joint with the hip rotation here, and of course there's your ball joints, and there's a couple more details down here. It's sort of meant to be that the red and black are sort of the malicey components. However, obviously on the very fingertips here, it's actually that the black is the Ganongu that's running through the machine, and then these 1x1 hole studs are actually the rings that have just been corrupted and covered in the malice. The big central element is done using dishes. We've got, I believe it's the 6x6 design, both here on the front, and if I spin Seas Construct around, we've got another big one on the back. And this front one has had a sticker applied to it as well, which is based off my original design from Seas Construct Knockout. I will show you that up close on the Mineru version of the model. And it's got all 4 arms as well. I did design a digital version where you could take the top 2 arms off and you could put the attachment points on there to recreate it from the first phase, but to visually distinguish it from Mineru, I've chosen only to buy the parts for the 4-arm version now, which is more parts anyway, so I don't think anyone's going to be complaining about that. And then the top arms also have the exact same posability. By far though, my favourite detail here though has to be the sort of range of motion we have on the neck. Now it's going to be a little bit difficult to show because, as I mentioned, these models are a little bit finicky, but you can see here that I've got a couple of different neck pieces which could be posed in a variety of different ways. So for example, let's just have it off to the side to start with, and that allows us to sort of put C's Construct's head on that tilt like you see in these sort of bosses opening animation. And then of course we can put it up central again. I do really love it with this sort of like slightly tilted head off to one side. I think that's a lot of fun. She built wrong. And well, that was embarrassing because throughout that entire clip, I've realized that C's Construct's head has been built wrong. These flower pieces are hidden here, making use of the heart's sort of bulbous shape to recreate a couple bits of those golden details. I'm going to talk at length about the heads because they are sort of an incredibly difficult part of this to design. And it was also super important that we get this right. So here you can see the fact that this head is attached on this assembly here, which is very similar to the arms, but not only does it allow us to have it directly pointing up, but we can actually have, and if again these are nice and stiff, which is good because what you want for figure posability is we can have up and to the left or the right. So if I put this back in now, and now you'll see that the head is sort of pointed off to the side. So again, that gives us another way to sort of do the head tilting, but also then if we sort of push that upwards, you'll now notice it's going up and to the left. So if I make sure that it's the second one that's directly up, and then reattach the head to the model, you can see that it just changes the orientation and makes him look slightly more disorientating, which is a lot of fun. And I'm really pleased with how this head joint turned out, and I think it's what makes Seized stand out and is my favorite of the two of them. I think the forearms also helps as well, although I much prefer the sticker decal work on Mineru as well, as you're going to see in shortly. I love using the Lord of the Rings ring piece. I was worried I wouldn't be able to use this piece because I thought it had retired or was an excluded mold, but obviously with the return of Lord of the Rings it's back, but also it's being used in system sets such as the Birds of Paradise vase, so that actually means it can be used in contexts like this. And of course its biggest use here is for the rings around the eyes, which are actually very, very multiply layered, including red 1x1 plates behind the dishes, then of course the dishes, and we'll talk about why they're aqua in just a second, and then of course the golden ring, which is nice and shiny and has an extra layer of detail. It was actually really hard to get these heads to, one, look good and look recognizable to the game, and I am missing a white version of these over here, but also if I rip Mineru's head off as well, to make them visually distinct from each other, and that's been done through the use of a couple of different shapes, as well as keeping them obviously very similar. Obviously the horns are different, so that the detailing up here they're actually just different sizes as well to begin with, and of course the decay on the Seized version. Now while I've got them both here in front of me, it's a good time to talk about these in aqua. On the original model they came in sand green, and that is true, that part is actually available in sand green, which is really, really awesome. However, it was only released in one set in 2001 linked with Life on Mars, so getting my hands on 3 of them and actually a 4th one for Sonia's tea time is proving quite difficult. So one day I'll change them out, but I actually quite like the aqua contrast in the meantime. It sort of matches this lighter area around the eyes that we see in the game. And actually, as we've got Mineru's head off, we can recreate, of course, the part of the quest line from Tears where Link has the choice to carry this around. You could realistically ultra hand it, but he can have this sort of giant mask in his fist as well. So it's good that this head in particular is easily removable. And unsurprisingly, like most LEGO accessories, it completely covers his face. So that was one of the part compromises that we had to make. In fact, both of the heads actually did receive complete redesigns between the last time you saw this model digitally and now. But that is a story for another day. So, barring talking, of course, about stickers, which was the big change, and then the change to the structure of the arms, we're going to put Seized to the side. You'll be seeing Seized again at some point in the future, probably quite soon, when we have a look at all 6 of the main story Tears of the Kingdom bosses. And let's actually attach Mineru's head back on. So, of course, Mineru is a similar and yet different model at the same time, because not only is Mineru a good guy, but also is significantly smaller. When we bring Seized in here, you'll notice that Seized is slightly larger. That is deliberate. Again, it's very, very subtle, but Seized is larger. And of course, Seized is a mech. Now, I didn't just have Link over here for fun today because, of course, I can attach Link to the back. And most importantly, he can knock Mineru's head off, of course, because that is what happens in these videos. There we go. And you can see that he pokes his head up just above Mineru's head. So it's actually like perfectly aligned as well. So he actually looks like he's piloting the creature as well. Again, I've got a design fix on the way for these arms. They should not be this loose, but they are built in a very similar way to C's construct. You can immediately see the gold and transparent for the sort of energy flowing through. Unfortunately, this part does not come in teal yet, which means I can't have it as actual Zonai energy, so trans clear is the next best thing, but it much clearly shows the rings passing through. I love the color scheme scheme with these arms as well. I think this is just so very Zonai. Again, we've got the 3x3 dishes here to sort of represent the custom part, which we'll be talking about very soon now. And of course I can lift these arms all the way up into the air. I haven't gone and bought any attachments for them like we had in the official set or the Ultra and Creativity Toolbox, so that is an upgrade for another day to give them some weapons, but again that's more of a display thing than anything else. Again, same waist articulation, although this is significantly different because it actually uses one of the official mech bodies, and technically speaking, this is probably going to break her neck as I do it, I can actually fold down the front as well, which is just one of the building techniques. But I thought that was funny because it almost means the Link could sort of do some construction work or something, and I'm tempted to hide an Easter egg of like a construct core or something in there because I think that's really silly. You'll notice the print is slightly misaligned, coming back to that in a second, and we actually do have some head articulation as well, especially when Link's not on here. Of course, this is designed to be easily removable, and I chose white in there to represent the sort of pattern that you can see going up here. She's got the little third eye on the forehead. And actually has controls around here, which again is something that she actually does have, but is also specifically important because this was designed to be a playset for kids. Although, let's talk about it, there is one very, very clear flaw to these guys as playsets, isn't there? And I'm largely going to put it down to the fact that I design custom sets and I stay within 10% as best as possible. Oh, doesn't she look cute like that? Oh, that's so sweet, she's waving. But I designed them to be in 10% of realism, and a lot of the design language still works here, but I am, at the end of the day, not an official designer. Therefore, I don't have the skills. So I would still like to support this as a valid concept that two LEGO construct mechs that could fight would be a really awesome set. However, I think we need a really talented designer to come in and actually know what they're doing and be able to make these guys stronger. That being said, I do have fixes planned, like I've talked about, with the bars and so on, and I'm sure I'll find a way for that to actually improve structural stability. But I do really love how they look. They're going to be fantastic at conventions. Obviously, C's has the extra appeal of joining the boss lineup, again, just teasing that future video. But Mineru, as a main character of the game, it's great to have her. Now, is she overscaled? Yes, absolutely. If her legs probably were shorter, they probably should be shorter. I might actually change that at some point. If I make her legs shorter, she'd probably be pretty close because she's only, what, about 3 links tall, and we obviously know her head is all right proportioned. But then again, the world of minifigure proportion stuff is all a bit wacky anyway, because if you put her next to my Breath of the Wild Hyrule Castle, which is also sat off to my left, again, very excited to show that to you guys, you'll see that she's about the entire size of the Sanctum and bigger than Calamity Ganon, who actually I can grab here, which looks tiny in comparison. But on the other hand, she's scaled pretty well to C's construct, and she's scaled even better to some of the other Tears of the Kingdom bosses, which are actually pretty close to the right scale, at least yeah, no, I think all 5 of them are pretty close in scale, actually. So I'm going to take it as a win for her. Now, I promised I'd talk to you about these decals, and I do actually have a specific video coming out soon, or at least a video where I'm actually going to show you literally live how I apply these decals. But these white-backed water slide decals, trust me, you never ever want to apply on a curved surface, and they are my original designs from C's Construct Knockout. Oh, they look perfect. We got one on the 3x3 golden tile, which came out on C3PO last year, I believe. So that was lucky that part came out in time. And then the big 6x6 dish is not new, although I think it did also have a recent appearance in the Beauty and the Beast castle. That might be a wider size. Now, the real part that I wanted here was the 6x6 golden dish. Now, this part is not new. It has appeared before, but it was quite rare. However, it just came out on the Van Gogh sunflowers earlier this year, so that means it made its way to Bricks and Pieces and was actually quite affordable as well, which was great. And just like with C's, this head went under a redesign. We've got the aqua here instead, and then these new sort of white curves here, which sort of create the feathering out from the side of the face. I'm really happy with these. I think that they are about as close as you can get them, at least at this play scale, not as display models. But yeah, these decals have just been applied as water slides. They've been sealed and treasured. They're custom drawn and sized to fit the Lego parts. The only difference and special technique here is for the curved piece. You'll notice that the design just doesn't line up very well, although you'd actually be hard pressed to know, because you actually have to do this as sort of a special curve shape to match the dish, and then there's always a slight overlap just because of how that always works. But I could not have dreamed of that looking better. That looks straight out of my model in game. Of course, with the notable exception, I can't believe C's head fell off again, with the notable exception of one component, and that is this 3x3 dish. So let's talk about my custom mold and the biggest way that these guys have changed. So back when I was designing the custom set showcase Wave 8, which is the Tears of the Kingdom wave, I knew that the constructs were going to give me some kind of trouble, specifically because of their color scheme, which we quickly worked down to be sand green and of course teal, of which only a couple of elements remain on Mineru and then none on the Seas construct, which is what actually made Seas an easier model to translate, is purely because there were less awkward colors. I knew they were also going to give me trouble because of the concentric ring design. It was pretty early on that I landed upon the Dokok tentacles, specifically for the soldiers and captain arms, and actually the constructs were the first part of any of Tears of the Kingdom that I did build in Lego form, purely because I needed to know that it was possible. And I came up with a solution that I'd like to design a new element specifically for Mineru and the Seas construct, because they knew from very early on that they were going to be a set. And it was specifically with the idea of creating a larger ring element for their arms. However, it also became pretty clear that the steward constructs were going to need a similar piece. And thus I started on the adventure of making a part that would serve both purposes, because obviously one thing that we always like to do when making a new Lego mold is, unless it's for a specific character's head, is to make its utility as big as possible. We've talked about this before with the Octorok, Muktorok and Deku scrub mold family that I was able to create, specifically the business scrubs, and this was another similar occasion. However, it was specifically designed for Zonai constructs alongside of course the model that I designed for the fluxes, more on those in a minute. So the goal of this was to create a 3x3 sort of ring element, and it would be sort of closed on one side and sort of be C-shaped on the other, with the goal of replicating the rings on the bottom of the steward constructs and providing a stable base for them to be able to stand upright on, something that the dishes could not do. For the steward, the utility of this piece had to be that the official connection was offset to the back of the ring, obviously because there was no support in the middle. Although thinking about it now, perhaps a way of actually doing this piece in real life would be to make it a dual molded part with a transparent or teal coloured supports in the middle, sort of a cross shape that means that the whole is still central. Because when using this part on Mineru and Seas construct specifically, obviously with the support at the back of the ring and not in the centre, it made the arms look quite off-centered and added a little bit of disconnect to where the energy was flowing from, because the sort of bar attachment point, which is what this new element had as its legal attachment point, is a sort of 3.14 bar hole, which is the code name for standard Lego bars, and what the transparent pieces on Mineru's arm and of course what I was using on the steward construct would actually fit into. When it came to attaching those, they needed to be on the back for the steward construct just because of how that model was working and of course the C-shaped nature of the element, but it meant that the arms were weird. So actually translating them to these 3x3 dishes has worked out better for the sort of structure of the arm, and I actually quite like how they look. That being said, would I change them over to the custom mold if a custom mold like that was ever produced officially by the Lego group, or if I was able to get a good color match 3D print? Yeah, probably, just out of curiosity to see what it would look like if nothing else. But it would be a really interesting experiment. However, that was one big change that sort of worked in the favor of the arms. Not to mention the 3x3 dish does look good, it's just not very accurate, of course, to these sort of big transparent rings that we get. But the great utility of the piece that we designed in the custom set showcase, and why I'm really making this video, obviously the primary reason is to show these two off to you in real life because I think they're super cool, but also because I always like to get a message in there, is because I wanted to talk about the custom piece that we designed for the constructs again, because I think it goes highly underrated. So on one side, of course, you've got this ring shape, and then that comes to an opening at the front, like a C, like I mentioned, where you've got these two rounded ends. Now, this piece of design is specifically designed to work for steward constructs, where of course this is what their rings on their sort of legs, whatever their legs should be, looks like. And these actually have two anti-stud circles in them, where you can attach golden studs or orange studs or whatever matches the color profile to them, so that you have extra attachment points. So not only does this add further detail, which we also used on the Mineru set and so on, but it just adds more utility to the part, allows people to mock with it, have interesting shapes, but also recreates accurate details from the steward construct. Leaving us with this very odd shaped mold, which doesn't actually have a lot of system utility outside of decorative parts and of course this construct family. Now, this part was also used, therefore, on the soldier constructs, because it became very clear that there wasn't a 3x3 sort of brick shape that would work for their central torso. So once again, we made use of the bar hole. We turned the C backwards on them again, very similar to how we'd done on Mineru and the C's construct, so that you couldn't actually see the C opening, and that meant that the bar was at the front for them, which was great, and you were able to print on the back of the C shape with the little construct symbol. And this was super cool and super important. I love that the part was able to be used across the whole construct family, because of course that is, they're all made for the same guys, right? They're made by the Zonai, so that makes a lot of sense. But also it shows that this part has multiple utility. It is a Zelda part that has uses across well, one facet of the IP, but multiple sets, and that part was therefore used across a huge variety of the wave sets. And I really like that the constructs all share that design language. Again, if I ever had the part, I would love to recreate the entire construct family. There are still a couple of recolors I believe we're waiting for stuff like the soldiers and the stewards, unfortunately in particular, but I will take a look at them now that I've got Mineru and Seized here, because I would like to have the whole family. And let's not also forget that, of course, Mineru and Seized don't have their sort of weapons and stuff that's attached to them yet, because that is something we'll deal with in the future. But that doesn't mean that the soldier and captain construct horns weren't actually removable to be fusible. This was something we included in all of the Kingdom sets, which is having anything that would be a fusible item be removable, and encourage kids to sort of create crazy weapons for Link, largely oversized ones and silly things like that. And obviously, while these ones aren't as cool as, say, Colgera's Scythe would be, still being able to take the Captain 1, 2, 3 and the Soldier 1, 2, 3 horns out of these models and attach them to a stick or a spear or a bow for extra fun was still super important to me. And of course, lots of printed elements to recreate the eyes on those guys, because they're much smaller and closer to minifigure scale, not quite perfect again, but I really like how this whole family turned out. Of course, that leaves us with one more member, that being the Flux construct, which is also made with a brand new and exclusive part, that being this cube here, which has 3 positive sides and 3 negative sides, so 3 sides with anti-studs and 3 sides with studs, in a specific pattern that allows you to rearrange it and disconnect it and change things around. Once again, it uses the superhero poser pieces as well as other elements in order to create sort of the man structure and sort of have the blocks posed in the correct position. However, this can be rearranged into its flying form and also the cube form. Now, the goal with this part was obviously to make something that was useful here, but was to not make the ultimate brick. I know a lot of people might be seeing this positive and negative side of cube and thinking of all the potential for direction inversions and its usefulness in builds. However, it's actually a little bit neutered just because of the way that it functions and the way the anti-studs stick out, because it's based off the Minecraft head element, which actually makes it slightly less useful, which was actually deliberate because I didn't want this part to become effectively too overpowered in the LEGO meta. However, that is a separate discussion for another day. I hope you guys appreciated seeing Mineru and Seized construct. I will post a little short when their base arrives and I get them much more stable and upgraded. Of course, look forward to seeing the castle in real life very, very soon, alongside Queen Gibdo and the rest of the bosses as we get ready for Cardiff Brick Festival coming up in October, which I'm very excited to be debuting these guys at. And of course, look out landing in the next calendar year as well. It's all very, very exciting. So let me know your thoughts on these guys down below and the construct family as a whole. Let me know who you'd like to see in real life next, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye bye.